All right, let's get this review mash rolling.
I'm ready when you are.
You know how this works. We take a deep dive into a game.
Yep.
And then you listening at home decide if it's worth your weekend. You know,
Totally.
sometimes you just want something you can really get into and finish in a couple of days.
Absolutely.
So today we are looking at Avowed.
Oh, yeah.
Avowed,
Yeah.
a brand new first-person fantasy RPG.
Nice.
And you're not going to believe this, but it's set in the same universe as Pillars of Eternity.
Whoa. For real.
Yeah. The Pillars of Eternity games, you know, those isometric RPGs from Obsidian.
No, yeah.
The ones with all the lore and the super challenging combat.
Pillars of Eternity, man, they really set the bar high when it came to world building.
Oh, they did.
They even managed to make all that dialogue interesting.
So good.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see how Avowed measures up,
Yeah.
especially since it's now in first person.
Definitely.
So you've been combing through reviews, right?
Oh, yeah, I've got a whole mountain of them here.
Okay, let's break this down.
Okay.
First up, The Living Lands. That's where Avowed is set, right, in Eora.
Mm-hmm.
People are saying it's visually stunning.
Oh, yeah.
But is it all just looks?
Well, one thing that stood out to me in the reviews was how much they talked about, like, the verticality of the world.
Verticality?
Yeah, like they said, exploring the living lands, it's like stepping into Morrowind. Think sprawling caves and shanty towns built right on cliffs.
No way.
Yeah. And they were saying it really gives you that sense of scale and
Yeah.
exploration that's kind of rare these days.
That's so cool. If they actually captured that classic RPG exploration vibe, that's huge.
Absolutely.
Especially if there's cool stuff to find.
Yeah,
Eora is known for his secrets, right?
exactly. And speaking of secrets, the main plot is all about you. You're the royal envoy, and you arrive in the living lands with this message from the emperor.
Okay.
Except you're also a godlike, which basically means in Eora that you were blessed by a godlike before you were born.
Whoa, wait.
Mm.
Godlike powers. Okay, I'm listening. Which God blessed our main character.
That part's actually unclear, but it is connected to like the main conflict of the game, which is the Dream Scourge.
The Dream Scourge.
Yeah, it's like this plague sweeping through the living lands. And this is where some reviewers start to get a little iffy. They say that the main plot, while it clocks in at a solid 20 to 50 hours, depending on how much you explore,
Okay.
it feels kind of familiar.
Familiar how? Like
Yeah.
same old plot points we've seen before.
Exactly. The chosen one narrative, predictable twists, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah, come on. Really?
Yeah. One reviewer even called it like a theme park RPG.
Theme park.
Yeah. Beautiful to look at, but ultimately you can't really change anything.
Oh, no.
Which actually brings us to another concern. The illusion of choice.
Ugh, that is a big one in RPGs.
Oh, yeah.
It's frustrating when your choices don't feel like they have any real impact on the world.
Totally. And it seems like the lack of a faction alignment system might be contributing to that in this game. So your choices are often super binary. There are no, like, relationship sliders or reputation systems to, like, track consequences. One reviewer pointed out that NPCs don't even remember choices you made in past conversations.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, that sucks. Makes the world feel less dynamic and reactive to your actions.
Right.
Okay, so the story might be a bit shaky,
Yeah.
but maybe Avowed redeems itself in other areas. Like, how about the combat?
Oh, combat. Oh, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
From what I've gathered, reviewers say it's super exhilarating and magic is at the forefront.
Yeah.
Spells, godlike abilities, you name it.
Nice. Okay, tell me more.
But some reviewers are worried that this emphasis on spellcasting might overshadow melee combat.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem.
Yeah.
I personally love going full mage in RPGs,
Yeah.
blasting everything with fireballs.
Yeah.
But a good RPG should cater to different play styles, right? Like,
Yeah.
you be able to choose how you want to play.
100%. So the question is melee combat still viable? And is it fun in Avowed?
I see.
Or is it just kind of an afterthought?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. And speaking of mechanics, the skill and progression system seems to have a pretty steep learning curve.
Oh.
Yeah. Gear upgrades are key, and you really have to manage your resources carefully.
So it's not just about finding shiny new loot.
Not really.
You actually have to, think about what you're picking up and how you're using it.
Yeah, and from what I gathered, the gear progression is really centered around upgrading your weapons to higher tiers.
Oh, okay.
No raining loot on the player,
Right.
Plus, the vendors have limited supplies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which seems designed to, encourage players to go out and explore for crafting materials.
You know what? I actually kind of like that. It forces you to be strategic, right?
Mhm.
Makes every resource, every upgrade feel more impactful.
Yeah, exactly.
But wait, What about those players who love the thrill of the loot chase?
Right. Well, some reviewers did say that this lack of flashy loot was a negative.
Yeah,
They worried it might lead to a repetitive gameplay loop, especially if all you're doing is upgrading the same basic weapons.
that's true.
But others argued that it actually makes you make harder choices, about which weapons to invest in.
Yeah, that's a good point. When resources are scarce, you can't just upgrade everything.
Exactly. You got to prioritize.
Exactly. So speaking of prioritization, some reviewers mentioned a few systems in Avowed that they found redundant,
Oh, like what?
like the cooking and food systems. Apparently, they don't really offer much in terms of gameplay benefits.
So they're more flavor than substance.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. And another gripe I saw was about the lack of enemy AI changes on higher difficulties.
Oh no, what do you mean?
Like, how we both love a good challenge.
Of course.
Right. Bring on the tactical mastermind enemies.
Yes.
But from what I read, it seems like Avowed's difficulty scaling is kind of basic. Mostly just boosts enemy health and damage.
Oh, come on.
I know, right?
Not another damage sponge simulator.
It's not really what we're looking for when we talk about a challenging RPG experience.
Okay, so let me get this straight. Avowed has stunning visuals,
Check.
a potentially predictable story,
Uh-oh.
a combat system that might be a little too focused on magic,
Potentially. Yeah.
and some, shall we say, questionable design choices.
Yeah, there are a few.
So where do we go from here? What do we do with all this information?
Well, I think it's time to really delve into the different playstyles. You mentioned earlier you love playing a mage, right?
Oh, yeah.
So let's imagine you're starting a new playthrough and you're going in as a pure mage build.
All right. Avowed.
What aspects of Avowed are you most drawn to?
Ooh, though, definitely the variety of spells and godlike abilities. I want to see all the cool combinations and experiment.
I hear yaw. The reviewers did say that there is a ton of fun to be had with mixing spells and creating devastating combos. But given your love for all things magic, how do you feel about the limited vendor supplies? Do you think having to hunt down specific materials would make the game more fun, or would it just feel like a chore?
That's a good question. I think it depends on how the process is implemented.
Mm.
If it feels organic and like part of the exploration, then yeah, I'm all for it. But if it's just grinding for the sake of grinding, then it could get old fast.
Totally.
And what about those moments when you come up against an enemy that's resistant to magic?
Oh, right.
Like the reviewers didn't really get into how Avowed handles that. Would you be okay switching to a melee weapon in those situations, or would that feel weird for your mage build? That's tough. A good RPG should let you overcome challenges within your chosen playstyle, right?
Ideally, yeah.
Maybe there are spells or abilities that help you deal with magic resistance.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Or maybe you can craft items to boost your magical effectiveness.
That's true. I'd have to see how it's all implemented.
Yeah, I guess we just don't have enough info yet.
Not yet.
So let's say you're the hardcore warrior type,
Okay.
all about steel and strength. What are you noticing in the reviews?
Well, the reviewers did talk about how weighty and responsive the melee combat feels. They said it's visceral and impactful, but they weren't as excited about the gear progression. Do you think you'd be okay upgrading like a single weapon throughout the entire game? Or would the lack of unique loot eventually get boring?
If the upgrade system is deep and interesting, I could totally see myself sticking with one weapon. Like, imagine forging a legendary axe from a simple starting weapon, imbuing it with runes and enchantments along the way.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
I know, right?
But if it's too simple, yeah, the lack of variety would get to me after a while.
That's fair. And with all this emphasis on magic, how would you feel about that as a warrior?
Right.
Would it feel like you're always struggling to keep up with the spellcasters? Or would you enjoy the challenge of overcoming those magical obstacles with pure strength and skill?
I think a good warrior should be able to handle themselves, even in a magic-heavy world. It's all about strategy, right? Like using cover, timing your attacks, investing in skills that reduce magic damage. But the game needs to make that feel fair, you know?
Totally. It can't be a constant uphill battle against overwhelming odds.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked about mage builds, warrior builds,
Yes.
but there's another playstyle we haven't considered. Stealth.
Ah, yes, the sneaky approach. The reviews didn't really give us a ton of info about the stealth mechanics. They mentioned using stealth for an advantage in combat, but that's about it.
So there's some potential there, but how deep does it go?
That's the question, right? Can you really embrace the shadows and play as, like, a silent predator?
Or is it just a surface level thing?
I was thinking if we connect it back to the limited vendor supplies, A stealthy character could actually thrive in Avowed. Think about it. Pickpocketing, lockpicking, using the environment to your advantage.
I like where you're going with this. A cunning rogue who relies on skill and outsmarting enemies instead of brute force.
Exactly.
But the combat encounters would need to support that kind of playstyle.
Yeah, absolutely. Imagine a stealthy character using traps, distractions, and quick strikes to eliminate enemies quietly and efficiently. The environment would need to have lots of options for hiding, flanking, and using the shadows.
Right. What about loot for a stealth build? Would upgrading basic daggers be enough?
Ooh, good question.
Or would they need more specialized gear?
I think the crafting system could really shine here. What if you could craft poisons, smoke bombs, or enchanted daggers that silence enemies?
Now that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about mages, warriors, stealth characters, but what about the diplomats?
Oh, right.
It's the room for talking your way through problems in Avowed.
Well, the reviews did say that choice and consequence are big parts of the narrative, so that could mean dialogue and diplomacy are important.
So you're saying there's hope for the smooth talkers,
Maybe.
the master negotiators.
Potentially. Imagine navigating the political landscape of Avowed, mediating disputes between factions, forging alliances that could change the course of events.
Okay, I'm listening. That sounds awesome. But how does dialogue actually work in the game?
Right.
Are there branching paths, skill checks, reputation systems? Those are crucial for a good diplomacy system.
Yeah, and if it's done well, it could even address the whole illusion of choice issue we talked about before.
Exactly.
If your words can have a real impact, like forging peace treaties, changing public opinion, preventing wars.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Yeah.
That's the kind of depth and consequence we want to see.
Definitely.
All right, we've got a lot to unpack here. We've talked about the world, the characters, the gameplay. But before we jump to any conclusions, let's talk about something crucial. Factions.
Well, the Aedir Empire is definitely a major player here.
Right.
They're the ones who sent you, the royal envoy, into the Living Lands.
Yeah, sounds like classic Empire stuff, right? Expansion, taking control, the usual.
Pretty much.
So who are these locals we're dealing with? Any familiar faces from Pillars of Eternity?
Oh, yeah. The Tsarp are back. You remember those guys?
Oh, yeah, the reptilian folks. Strong, kind of like, what's the word?
Straightforward?
Yeah, straightforward when it comes to conflict.
Definitely. Some reviewers were hinting at possible alliances or showdowns with them.
Ooh, I loved the Zaurup in Pillars. They were intense.
Oh.
Who else is in the mix?
The Roynish are mentioned too.
Okay.
But their role seems a bit more mysterious. They're described as more spiritual, connected to nature and ancient magic.
Interesting.
One reviewer even compared them to druids, which I thought was pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got a clash of cultures then. Empire, warriors, and magic-wielding nature lovers.
Yeah, it sounds like there's potential for some serious drama.
For sure.
And then there's the whole godlike thing, too.
Right, the godlikes.
The reviewers didn't go into specifics, but it seems like the protagonist's powers are somehow tied to the Dream Scourge.
The Dream Scourge. Right. Do we actually know what that is yet? Like, what's causing it?
Not a ton of details, but it's definitely more than just a physical sickness. One reviewer said it was like a spiritual rot, something that messes with your mind as well as your body.
Okay, that is creepy. But it makes you wonder how these different factions are reacting to this Dream Scourge, right? Are they working together, or is it every group for themselves?
That's where the whole choice and consequence system could really shine. Imagine having to decide who to help, who to trust, knowing your decisions could determine the fate of an entire faction.
Oh, that would be amazing. But I'm still not sold on the whole no faction alignment thing.
Right.
Like, how can your choices really matter if there aren't any alliances or rivalries to navigate?
I hear you. One reviewer said that your choices are more about your personal journey as a character rather than like drastically changing the world's politics.
So it's more about who you become than who wins the war.
Yeah, it seems like Avowed's story might be more focused on the personal cost of heroism rather than these huge world-changing events.
Okay, that could be interesting. But I still want to feel like my choices have weight, even if they're on a smaller scale.
Definitely. Speaking of scale, what about the cities and towns? What are the main hubs where we'll be spending our time?
Yeah, give me those bustling taverns, shady back alleys, mysterious shops.
Well, reviewers mentioned two main locations. Paradise, which is like this big port city,
Yep.
a real melting pot of cultures, a hub for trade. Think Waterdeep from Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, I love a good port city. Always full of intrigue and opportunity. What about the other one?
The other one's called Gilded Vale, and it's a much smaller, more rural settlement, like tucked away in a valley. Sounds really peaceful.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, it sounds like a place where traditions are really important and life moves a bit slower.
I like that. The bustling city and the quiet countryside. It makes you wonder how those different settings will play into the quests and the stories we'll encounter, right?
Totally. One reviewer mentioned that the Ader Empire has a much stronger presence in Parades, which makes sense considering it's such a strategically important port.
Ooh, okay, so maybe there's some political tension there, like some resistance brewing among the locals.
Yeah, potentially.
Mm.
And that could lead to some interesting choices. Do you side with the Empire and help them maintain control?
Right. Or do you support the locals who are fighting for their autonomy?
Man, that's the stuff I love in RPGs. Those moral gray areas, those tough decisions.
For sure.
Okay, but enough about civilization. Let's talk about the wilderness. Those breathtaking landscapes, hidden dangers lurking in the shadows.
Oh, yeah. The reviewers were gushing over how beautiful the living lands are. They mentioned lush forests, treacherous coastlines, even towering mountains.
Sign me up. A scenic hike through those mountains. Yes, please.
I'm with you.
But what about the hidden dangers part?
Right, well.
Any monstrous creatures we should be worried about? Bandits.
Oh, there'll be bandits for sure.
Good, good. Gotta have bandits.
But the Stranglewood is mentioned a lot. It's this dense, ancient forest, and the reviewers are already speculating about what could be hiding in there.
Spooky.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Okay, I'm ready for ancient evils, creepy crawlies, bandits, the works.
And the ground coast sounds particularly treacherous. It's a stretch of coastline where the sea is constantly trying to reclaim the land. Whoa, okay, that's atmospheric. Imagine exploring crumbling ruins half submerged in water, battling sea monsters that emerge from the depths.
That's the vibe I'm getting too. And it all ties into the exploration aspect we talked about before. Reviewers kept saying there's a ton to discover if you go off the beaten path.
Yes.
Yeah.
Love that. Hidden pathways, secret grottos, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, it's there.
Okay, so the world sounds amazing, but let's not forget about magic. We've talked about spells and stuff.
Right.
But what about the overall magic system in Avowed? What kind of wizardry can we unleash?
Well, it seems like they're drawing a lot from Pillars of Eternity, but with some new twists.
Okay.
Elemental magic is definitely front and center, like fire, ice, lightning, all the classics.
Classic, yeah. Always fun. What about some of their more unconventional schools? Like necromancy, illusions, mind control, the fun stuff.
The reviewers didn't get into a lot of specifics, but they did mention necromancy.
Ooh, nice.
And there were hints at something called God-touched magic, which I'm assuming is connected to your protagonist's powers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Summoning undead hordes, wielding the power of the gods.
Sounds epic, right?
So how do we learn all this cool magic stuff? Like, how does it work in the game?
It sounds like a pretty traditional skill tree system. You invest points to unlock new spells and abilities. But one reviewer mentioned there aren't strict class restrictions.
Right.
So you can potentially experiment with different schools of magic if you want.
I love a good hybrid build. Imagine a battle mage who can summon a firestorm and then charge into melee with a flaming sword.
It's so cool.
Talk about epic.
And don't forget about the possibility of finding powerful artifacts and enchanted items.
Right.
If Avowed follows the Pillars formula, there's going to be some serious game-changing loot to discover.
Yeah, finding that perfect staff or amulet that completely changes your playstyle. That was one of the best things about Pillars.
For sure.
Okay, so we've got all this talk about magic and combat, but what about the more mundane stuff?
Like what?
Like resource management, crafting, that kind of thing.
Yeah, those are important too.
Is that a big part of the game?
From what I gathered, resource gathering and crafting are pretty crucial in Avowed. Remember those limited vendor supplies we talked about?
Yeah.
Sounds like you'll be spending a lot of time scavenging materials to upgrade your gear and craft consumables.
So it's not just about looting enemies and selling the extras.
Not exactly. One reviewer compared the crafting system to Skyrim, where you're constantly gathering ingredients to make potions, poisons, and other useful stuff.
Okay, I can get behind that. It makes the world feel more interactive when you're actively looking for resources and ingredients. But how dumb is the crafting system? Is it just following simple recipes, or is there more to it?
It seems like there's room for experimentation. They talked about discovering new recipes through exploration and even combining ingredients in unexpected ways to create unique effects.
Ooh, I love that. A little alchemy, a dash of mad science. Makes crafting so much more fun when you're not just following a set path.
Exactly. And it ties into that whole choice and consequence thing that seems to run through Avowed.
Okay, we've got factions vying for power, a world that begs to be explored, a magic system that sounds both familiar and new, and a crafting system that encourages you to experiment. But there's one big thing we haven't really talked about yet.
The themes, like what the game is really about.
Exactly. What are the big questions Avowed is asking?
The reviewers were being kind of cryptic about this, but they did hint at some pretty heavy themes, like colonialism,
Okay.
religious conflict, the struggle to find your own identity in a world shaped by powerful forces.
Wow, that's a lot to unpack. So it's not just a lighthearted fantasy adventure.
It doesn't sound like it. One reviewer even compared it to Pillars of Eternity in terms of its complex themes and moral ambiguity.
Ooh, okay. I'm officially intrigued. Give me those tough choices, those moral gray areas, those moments where you have to really question your values.
It sounds like you're going to get all that. Imagine facing the consequences of the Ader Empire's actions, seeing the impact their expansion has on the people of the living lands.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that really makes you think.
Yeah.
Okay, enough about the serious stuff. What about the soundtrack? You know, good soundtrack can really make or break a game.
For sure. So what did the reviewers have to say about the music?
They said it was really immersive, blending orchestral scores with more intimate melodies. You know, to evoke a sense of wonder and peril and all those emotions.
So it's not just generic background music, it actually adds to the overall experience.
Absolutely. Imagine exploring those haunting ruins we talked about, with the music swelling up, building a sense of mystery and awe.
Ooh,
Or fighting a boss battle with this intense music pumping you up.
man, that's what a good soundtrack should do. It should make you feel like you're right there in the game, living the story.
And from what I've read, Avowed's soundtrack definitely delivers.
Yeah, that's awesome. But there's more to audio than just music, right?
What about the sound design in general?
Oh, right. The reviewers didn't say a whole lot about it, but they did mention the sound design being really well done, especially the environmental sounds. Oh, yeah. Those subtle cues that really immerse you in a world, like the wind rustling through leaves, a creaky door opening, or those distant howls in the wilderness. Those are the things that really make a world come alive.
One reviewer mentioned how the sound of your footsteps changes depending on the terrain you're walking on.
Oh, wow.
Like walking on stone sounds different than walking on grass.
That's so cool.
Those little touches can really add to the immersion.
Yeah, they make you feel like you're really there experiencing it all.
Exactly. And speaking of experiencing things firsthand, there's one thing we haven't talked about yet. Those little details, the hidden gems that make a game truly special.
You mean like Easter eggs, environmental storytelling, those unexpected moments of humor or brilliance?
Exactly. Did the reviewers mention any of that in Avowed?
Oh, yeah, for sure. They talked about how Obsidian's signature wit and humor shine through in the dialogue, the character interactions, even just in the environment itself.
So it's not all doom and gloom. There are moments of levity to break up the tension.
Oh, definitely. One reviewer even mentioned finding a group of Zarep arguing about the proper way to brew tea.
That's awesome.
I know, right? And they mentioned lots of environmental storytelling, too, like abandoned campsites with half-eaten meals and scattered playing cards.
Oh, I love that.
Or like crumbling statues with inscriptions that hint at some forgotten tragedy.
Those are the things that make a world feel lived in and real. It makes you want to explore every corner and uncover all those little stories hidden within the environment.
Absolutely. And it sounds like Avowed is packed with those kinds of details, which just shows how much attention Obsidian pays to creating a believable world.
Okay, so we've got humor, environmental storytelling. What about difficulty? Is Avowed can be a cakewalk, or will it challenge even the most hardcore RPG fans?
It seems like it's designed to cater to a wide range of players. There are adjustable difficulty settings, so you can tailor the challenge to your liking.
So it's not just a one-size-fits-all approach.
Nope.
There's room for both casual players who want to enjoy the story and hardcore gamers who want a real challenge.
Exactly. One reviewer said they enjoyed a tough playthrough on the highest difficulty, while another one praised how accessible the game is for people who are new to RPGs.
That's good to hear. A good RPG should offer a fun and engaging experience for everyone, regardless of their skill level.
Totally. And don't forget, the difficulty can also be affected by your choices in the game.
Right.
Your character build, your companions, the paths you take, all of those things can impact the challenges you face.
It's not just about tweaking a slider in the options menu. The difficulty is woven into the fabric of the game itself.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. Your choices really do seem to matter, not just for the story, but for the actual gameplay experience, too.
Okay, so the difficulty system is flexible. But what about the choices themselves? We've talked about this illusion of choice thing. Do the choices you make in Avowed actually have a meaningful impact on the world?
From what I've read, choice and consequence are a core part of the Avowed experience. They said your decisions shape the narrative, your relationships with other characters, and even the fate of the entire living lands.
So it's not just window dressing?
It doesn't seem like it.
Our choices actually matter.
That's what they're saying. Reviewers talked about facing real moral dilemmas,
Ooh, I like the sound of that.
where there are no easy answers, choices where you have to weigh the needs of the many against the needs of the few, decisions that can have ripple effects throughout the world.
Okay, now you're speaking my language.
Hmm.
Give me those tough decisions, those moments where I really have to think about the consequences of my actions.
It sounds like Avowed will definitely deliver on that front. Imagine having to choose between siding with the Ader Empire and upholding their rule, or supporting the local factions fighting for their freedom.
Man, those are the kind of choices that stick with you. You know, knowing that your decision has a real impact on the lives of the people in that world.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's not just those huge world-altering choices either, right?
Right.
The reviewers also mentioned smaller, more personal choices
Exactly.
that can shape your characters' relationships and their reputation.
Like, do you spare a defeated enemy? Do you show mercy to a thief who's begging for your forgiveness?
Yeah, those smaller choices can sometimes feel even more impactful because they reveal your character's true nature.
Exactly.
Okay, so Avowed sounds like it's shaping up to be a truly immersive RPG.
Hmm.
Your choices matter, the world feels alive, and there's a lot to discover. But let's be real, no game is perfect.
Right.
And it sounds like Avowed has its share of problems too.
You're talking about the technical issues that some reviewers mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Bugs, glitches, all that fun stuff.
Right. Some people reported visual glitches, problems with quest progression,
Yeah.
instances of the AI acting weird.
So it's not a flawless experience then.
Not exactly, but from what I read, these issues seem to be relatively minor and not very frequent. They're not game-breaking bugs.
That's good.
And Obsidian will probably fix them in future patches anyway.
Yeah, and we have to remember these are early reviews.
Totally.
The game just came out, so there are bound to be a few kinks to work out.
It's almost expected with a game this big.
Okay, so we can forgive a few bugs.
Yeah.
But what about character creation? How much freedom do we have to make our protagonist truly ours?
Well, it sounds like the character creation system is pretty decent in terms of customization. You can change your appearance, choose a background,
Okay.
and select your starting skills.
So we're not stuck with some pre-made hero.
Nope, you can really make a unique character.
Awesome.
Yeah, one reviewer even said they spent like a long time in character creation, playing with different hairstyles, scars, tattoos,
Yeah.
all that.
I love that. Creating a character you're excited to play is so important. It's like you're creating an extension of yourself in that world.
Yeah. And it seems like the background choices actually have an impact on your starting stats and ability.
Oh, interesting.
Like, you could pick a street urchin background, which gives you bonuses to stealth and pickpocketing.
Okay, that's cool. Adds a bit of role-playing to the character creation process.
Right. It's not just about looks.
Exactly. Okay, so character creation sounds good, but what about inventory management?
Oh.
That can be a real pain in RPGs.
Yeah, no one wants to spend hours sorting through menus.
Exactly. So did they do anything to make inventory management less of a headache?
It sounds like they did. Reviewers mentioned a streamlined inventory system that's supposed to be super user-friendly.
Okay, that's good.
They said it's easy to navigate, and there are features to help you keep track of all your items and equipment.
So no more sifting through mountains of loot. We
Yeah.
can actually focus on the adventure.
Hopefully. One reviewer mentioned an auto-sort feature
Nice.
that organizes everything by category. Another one liked how they give you clear and concise information about each item, like its properties and what it does.
Yeah, little things like that can make a big difference. I hate it when a clunky interface pulls me out of the game.
Absolutely. Oh, and we can't forget about companions.
Set of companions, yes. Tell me about those. Who's going to be joining us on these adventures through the living lands?
From what I've read, it sounds like a diverse cast of characters,
Cool.
each with their own personality, backstory, and abilities.
Okay, but are they just generic archetypes, or do they feel like real characters?
They seem to be pretty well developed,
Okay.
with their own motivations and complexities. One reviewer even mentioned that you might be able to romance some of them.
Ooh la la. Adding a little romance to the adventure. Okay, I like it. But what about gameplay? How do the companions actually contribute?
Well, they play a part in both combat and exploration. They have different abilities and perspectives that can help you strategize.
So they're not just passive followers who tag along.
Definitely not.
They actually do stuff.
Yeah, they can be really useful. One reviewer talked about a companion with healing abilities who saved them in tough battles.
Handy.
And another one mentioned a companion who was great at lock-picking, which helped them access hidden areas.
Very nice. Do they have any impact on the story, though? Like,
No.
can they influence the narrative through their actions and choices?
It seems like they can. The reviewers hinted that some companions might have unique dialogue options or quests
Okay.
that open up new possibilities. Others might have connections to certain factions that can affect your decisions.
Interesting. So they're not just sidekicks, then. They're a big part of the overall experience.
Yeah, it seems like companions in Avowed are really integrated into every aspect of the game, which I think is really cool. But let's be honest, one of the things we all secretly want in an RPG is loot. What about the loot in Avowed?
Oh, yeah. Gotta get that loot.
You might be a little disappointed if you're expecting a constant stream of new items. The reviewer said the loot system is more focused on quality over quantity.
Interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like you'll be spending more time upgrading and customizing your existing gear rather than constantly finding new stuff.
So it's more about making meaningful choices about what you keep and upgrade, rather than chasing the next shiny new thing.
Exactly. And the crafting system seems to be a big part of how you enhance your gear.
Oh,
One reviewer said they found a really good sword early on,
yeah.
and they spent the whole game upgrading it with runes and enchantments.
You know what? I kind of like that. It's like your weapons and armor become more than just tools.
Right.
They become part of your character's story.
And don't forget the visual customization, too.
Oh, right.
The reviewers said you can change the appearance of your gear, add dyes, engravings, even change the shape of some items.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, it's all about creating a unique look for your character.
Exactly. Okay, so loot sounds pretty good, even if it's not about constantly finding new stuff. But here's a question for you. How realistic is Avowed overall?
What do you mean?
Like, does it strike a good balance between fantasy and believability? I want a world that feels immersive, but I also want it to feel grounded.
That is a tough balance to strike.
Right.
But from what I've read, Avowed seems to do a good job.
Okay.
It embraces the fantastical elements, but it also grounds them in relatable characters, relationships, and social issues.
So it's not just a mindless power fantasy.
It doesn't seem like it.
The characters have real problems and motivations,
Definitely.
even if they're using magic and fighting monsters.
Yeah. One reviewer said that even the threat of the Dream Scourge feels really realistic and urgent. It's not just some vague magical threat. It's a crisis with real consequences for everyone.
I like that. It makes the stakes feel higher, the choices more meaningful. And speaking of world building, that's another area where Avowed seems to excel.
Really?
Oh yeah, the reviewers loved the depth and detail of the world, the believable cultures, the rich lore.
Yeah, it sounds like they put a lot of work into it.
So it's not just some generic fantasy world.
Not at all. It feels like a real place with a history and culture of its own.
That's awesome.
Yeah, one reviewer talked about exploring ancient ruins and uncovering the secrets of a lost civilization. Another one mentioned chatting with people in a city, learning about their customs and beliefs.
It's those little details that really bring a world to life. But enough about the world. What about the story itself? Is it engaging?
From what I've gathered, the story blends personal journeys with epic conflicts. It explores themes of identity, destiny, and fighting against overwhelming odds.
Okay, that sounds promising.
Yeah.
But give me specifics. Heart-wrenching choices, epic battles, those moments that make you go, whoa, I can't believe that just happened.
It sounds like Avowed has the potential to deliver all of that. One reviewer mentioned a quest to uncover the truth behind their character's past.
Oh, mysterious.
And another one talked about being caught in the middle of a war between ancient factions, having to make choices that could decide the fate of nations.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more about these ancient factions and these world-altering choices.
It seems like the Ader Empire is at the center of everything, as they try to expand their control over the living lands. And you, as the royal envoy, are stuck in the middle. You have to navigate all these political complexities and make decisions that could have huge consequences.
So it's a story about navigating moral gray areas, about trying to find your place in a world where power and ambition often clash with justice and compassion.
That seems to be the main idea, yeah. And the reviewer said you'll have to make some really tough choices, like weighing your loyalty to the Empire against your compassion for the people they're hurting.
Man, I love those kinds of dilemmas in RPGs.
They're the best.
Okay, enough about this story. Let's switch gears and talk about character progression. How does Avowed handle character development? Does it offer a satisfying sense of growth and customization?
It seems like they went with a classless system,
Oh, interesting.
where you can spend skill points in different areas, so you have a lot of freedom to customize your character.
So you're not locked into a predefined path. You can actually create a character that evolves and adapts to your playstyle.
Exactly. One reviewer said they started as a warrior, but then started learning magic, so they ended up with this hybrid character who could tank damage and cast powerful spells.
That's awesome. I love the flexibility of a classless system. It lets you experiment and find what works best for you.
And it sounds like the skill trees themselves have a lot of depth, so you have to really think about which abilities to prioritize.
Okay, so character progression is looking good. But let's talk about the elephant in the room, combat.
Oh yeah, combat. That's what everyone wants to know about.
Tell me about the battles we'll be facing in Avowed. Are they challenging? Exciting?
Reviewers described the combat as a blend of real-time action and tactical decision-making.
Okay.
They said it's challenging and engaging. You have to use your abilities strategically and adapt to different enemy types.
So it's not just mindless button mashing. There's actual strategy involved.
Oh yeah, definitely. One reviewer mentioned how important positioning is, like timing your attacks and using the environment to your advantage.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. Give me those epic battles against terrifying foes. Those moments where you have to think on your feet and use every trick you've got to survive.
It sounds like Avowed will definitely deliver on that front. And don't forget, the combat is heavily influenced by your character build and the choices you make throughout the game, so each playthrough can feel really different.
Awesome. All right, so combat sounds good. One last thing before we wrap up. The user interface.
Ooh.
Is it intuitive? User-friendly?
I hate a clunky UI. It can totally ruin the experience.
Tell me about it. So did they do a good job with Avowed's UI?
It seems like they did.
Okay.
Reviewers praised it for being clean, intuitive, and easy to navigate. You can quickly access all the important info and functions without getting lost in menus.
Awesome.
Yeah, one reviewer even mentioned that there are customizable options so you can adjust the size and placement of elements to your liking.
Okay, that's a nice touch. A good UI should enhance the gameplay, not distract from it.
Exactly, and it sounds like that's exactly what Avowed's UI does. It gets out of your way and lets you focus on the important stuff.
The important stuff like exploring, fighting, making choices, and uncovering the secrets of the living lands.
Yeah.
Wow, we have covered a lot of ground here. We've explored every aspect of Avowed, from the story and characters to the gameplay mechanics and technical details. But the big question still remains. Is it worth your precious weekend hours? That is the question, isn't it? After hearing all this, I'm feeling, I don't know, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, cautiously is a good word. There's definitely a lot to be excited about here, especially for those who are already fans of the world of Eora.
For sure. Like, if you love Pillars of Eternity, I can see why you'd want to jump into this new corner of the universe.
Totally. Even with the switch to first person, it's still got that Pillars DNA.
Right. And even for folks who haven't played Pillars, there's a lot to like here. The world looks stunning.
Oh, yeah.
The combat system seems really interesting. And it's got that classic Obsidian blend of choice and consequence.
Definitely.
But we can't ignore the potential problems either.
Yeah, there are a few.
That main story might be predictable, the lack of meaningful choices, and some people might be disappointed if melee combat isn't as good as Magic.
For sure. And those could be deal breakers for some players.
Yeah, like if you're someone who lives for finding amazing loot, that upgrade-focused gear system might not be enough.
Right. And if you really crave a super challenging experience, that simple difficulty scaling might be a turnoff.
And while the world building sounds great, we don't know yet if it's as deep and nuanced as Pillars.
True.
So what's the verdict? Is Avowed a weekend-worthy RPG, or should we wait?
It really comes down to what you're looking for in a game. If you want something super polished and groundbreaking, Avowed might not be it.
But if you're craving a solid, fun RPG,
Yeah.
with a beautiful world to explore, a potentially great story,
Mm-hmm.
and a combat system that lets you experiment, then yeah, Avowed is worth checking out.
Especially if you like those more focused experiences, something you can actually finish in a weekend or two.
That's a good point. Not every RPG needs to be a 100-hour epic. Sometimes A shorter, well-crafted experience is exactly what you need.
Totally agree.
And from what we've seen, Avowed seems like it could be that kind of game. It respects your time, but it still has a lot of depth.
Yeah, I think so too.
But at the end of the day, the best way to know for sure is to play it yourself. We've given you all the information. Now it's up to you to decide if Avowed is the right game for you.
Could have said it better myself.
So to everyone listening, we leave you with this. Will you venture into the living lands and forge your own destiny in Avowed? Let us know what you think.
And until next time, happy gaming.